Um, hey everyone, Brett Mollin. As I said, we're going to talk about XRPL validators today. I'll just introduce myself and we'll talk about what a validator is, what it does, the responsibilities, how your validator reflects on your university, and how we can work together to make the whole community better. So this is me. Brett Mollin. I think this is my first UBRI conference, so I wanted to take some time here and get to meet a bunch of you. So, great to meet everyone. I know a lot of you from other events and Apex, and I'm been in software, enterprise software for 25 years. I've been at Ripple for 10 years, and thus in blockchain. I've traveled the world, literally. I've been to 28 countries for Ripple, from the Pacific island of Palau to the Bhutan and the Himalayas, talking to people about blockchain, getting people who have never heard of blockchain, like banks and central banks, to implement blockchain solutions for the first time. My current role is technical director for the partner success team. So really my role is from a technical perspective to represent the people who use the XRPL. Universities and partners are part of that, right? And there's things that affect you that, affect your businesses, affect your research. And really those are the things that I care about from a technical perspective. I co-lead this pod called the infrastructure pod. And we look at everything that involves infrastructure. As some people know, have met me before, I like to get personal. I'm an emotional guy. If you're any of the professors that I talk to, I like to know where you're from and what you do. I live in New York City, by the way. I was born in New York City, and I left for a long time, but I'm a fifth generation New Yorker. And one thing that we do at Ripple when you start is we give a fact about ourselves that you can't find online. So it's a way of introducing yourself at Ripple. I'll tell you that Brad Garlinghouse's was that he drove an Uber before he started at Ripple, so my guess is he was thinking of working at Uber as an executive, but and he did it in his Tesla. My non-Googleable fact is that I used to work at Whole Foods Market, if anybody knows what that is. Met my wife there. Great place, love it. And while I was working there in Mill Valley, California, Jerry Garcia came in. He was the guitarist for the Grateful Dead, and I made a burrito for him. And a most important part of this is 5 years of my life, I traveled around following the Grateful Dead, seeing them. So this was a big moment for me. My hands were shaking. And just knowing that fact, you probably assume a lot of things about me, and they are all true. So all true. So enough about me. And by the way, I'm really bad with names. I'm good with voices and things like that, but I'm good with numbers, IP addresses. Tell me your IP address. I'll remember it wherever. But public keys. The last 5 digits, I may get that, but horrible with names, so I apologize ahead of time. So XRPL validators. The validators of the network, we saw that consensus was the most important thing for someone to learn about blockchain in one of the presentations. The validators come to consensus on the XRPL. They decide what transactions make the ledger, right? If they make sure that Lauren doesn't double spend her XRP. She can't send her same 5 XRP to 2 different people. They contribute to the decentralization of the network. There was a time when I joined Ripple where Ripple ran all the validators, not very decentralized. Now Ripple runs one of 35 validators, so really a completely decentralized system. Very unique to this system in blockchain, not totally unique, but very unique, is that these validators and any node of the XRPL, there's no incentive. The mantra is no incentive is the best incentive. You run a validator because you have a business and you want that business to succeed. And so in the background, you say, we're going to spin up a validator and we're going to just do this for the whole community. So universities, we have UBRI people running validators. We have partners running validators. My friend and I run a validator in his basement. You know, you know, anyone can run a validator, but there's special validators out there. And those are the validators that we put on the unique node list. And this is a list that's published by the XRPL Foundation. And these are the, right now, 35 validators that are trusted in the network. And it's sort of like proof of association if you're looking at consensus, but it's not exactly like proof of association. Some people will call it that. But this unique list, my validator running in the basement, guess what? Not on the list. and we'll talk about why, right? These are very important. But we do have a number of UBRI members who run UNL validators, and it's very, very important. So as I said, right now there's 35 validators on the network. The validators vote on things besides coming to consensus. So they're coming to consensus, they're doing that work. No one has to do anything there. There's no admin. You know, I make this joke because I'm this person. I hope it's not offensive. The guy in shorts who goes over to the machine, you know, who works in your university IT department, you know, they don't need to do anything, right? The protocol is coming to consensus. But there are times where you actually have to take human interaction, and you can vote on things. And on the XRPL, when we add new features, new amendments, it takes greater than 80% of the 35 UNL validators to vote, to actively go in and vote yes for these to be applied to the network. So doing nothing is a no vote, right? And so you actually have to go in and do something. An admin has to go in and actually has to participate, be a part of the community, and has to make this vote. We'll talk about this. We hope that you kind of look into these things and just don't do it blindly. Only greater than 50% of UNL validators are needed to increase fees and reserves on the XRPL. Reserve is what we charge, like hold, like a wallet to have an account. Very important thing, and this is a much smaller threshold since it's just greater than 50%. So fees on the XRPL, famous for its low fees, could change if greater than 50%, so what's that, 18 of the validators voted for higher fees, we would have higher fees on the XRPL. By the way, if anyone's ever interested, that mechanism, that voting mechanism is incredible. And it compromises. I always say that, you know, we can't compromise as people, but the XRPL can. So look, and your students, that's a great thing to look into, how we compromise on fee voting. So I think of the UNL validators as the senators of the XRP ledger, right? These people are in control. It's a vote. There's 35 of them. You see the numbers that we need here, just like in the Senate, you need different percentages for different kinds of votes. This network secures, as you're seeing here, it currently is securing approximately 50 billion US dollars of value. So we have 35 entities who are the senators of a network that controls $50 billion in US value. You know those countries that I mentioned to you that I go to for Ripple? They don't have $50 billion of value. They have whole governments controlling them and legislative parties, right? So this is a very, very important role, which I think is kind of people aren't thinking about it that way. And that's why I'm here, you know, is like, think about this. If you're a UNL validator, you have a significant stake in a network that controls $50 billion of value. I think this is something that universities should be aware of at the highest levels of the university. You know why? It's because you have responsibility, right? Even if it's snowing out, you got to walk your dog, right? Even if you don't want to, right? The validators have responsibilities, and you want your validator to be highly available, pretty obvious. You want it to be identifiable. We don't want UNL validators where we can't contact the operator, right? So you can't have a completely anonymous validator. You can, but you're not going to get on the UNL, right? This is what gets you on the UNL. You want to have active participation in the voting process. So I can tell you, I see a number of validators that really never vote for anything. They just sit there, you know, so they're not really doing this. They're not active participants. And if I talk to these people at Apex and I'm like, did you have a problem with that feature? They're like, no. They're just not actively doing it, right? So updating the software is the other thing. When there's new versions of the XRPL, if these validators really need to be on the same version or a similar version of the software, these are things that are done very tightly within like the Ethereum community, within the Solana community, to make sure that all the validating nodes are on this have the same software running. We're a little bit looser with this in the XRPL world. So what I'd like everyone to think about is that your validator is a reflection on your university in the same way that your website is. You wouldn't want someone to go to your website and put up a lot of hate talk on the website for your university. That would reflect poorly on your university, right? You don't want your validator. You could vote to make the fees 1 million XRP for every transaction. Is that responsible? Right? Maybe you had an upset, disgruntled IT worker who's the person who votes on this, and they just go and do that without even asking you. Right? So I think that this is a time to start thinking about controls around these voting, rules around and process around the voting. I forget who you said, Lauren, but I know that there's one university where the blockchain club gets together and they vote to say what the validator is going to vote on. Yeah. Right? And I think these are the kind of things that entities that run validators need to start doing. And not only start doing that, but being open about it. They need to have minutes from these meetings. They need to publish the minutes of the meeting. Why did you vote for this amendment, or why didn't you vote for this amendment? So it's a responsibility. It reflects on your institution. And I think we're in this, working in blockchain. We're in this very open world, and you want this governance to be extremely open. You could do malicious things with your vote. There is a push right now from one individual to put an amendment in that would double the XRP that's ever been created. And their idea is this would be given to the new foundation, and they haven't, but it's not a crazy idea. Do I think it's healthy for the network? No one who understands tokenomics would ever think that doubling the supply of the token would be good for the network. This could be something really malicious. You could make that fee you can make the fee for doing one XRPL transaction more than all the XRP that ever been created. Right? And so you could do this. You could get 5 universities to vote for it. Maybe you get some other people, you could do malicious things. So I just think it's like a very important thing. Even no action, I think, is a reflection on the university, right? Like just doing nothing, just being like, oh, we bought the server, you gave us money, we bought the server, and we don't care. It's like there should be process around this. There should be care about upgrading and about voting, and it should be exciting. I think this is a really exciting thing. What other things is a university involved in that control $50 billion of value? And I think you were talking about there's kind of this new, I'm new to the university world, so kind of a new world of, universities where you're getting credited for being entrepreneurs. This is entrepreneurial. You are part of a network with 50 billion that controls $50 billion of value. So I just think it's a extremely important thing. I'm getting through this really fast because I usually open things up for questions a lot more. Couple of resources for you and how we can work together here. So one thing I mentioned is I'm co-leading an infrastructure pod at Ripple, and part of that is increasing the lines of communication for node operators. So we'll involve you all in that. You're all, obviously, we have your contact information, right? So there is, on the left-hand side here, what's that?
It's great. When does it start?
Really, it's starting. So the first thing you can do is opt into the group for node operators right there. So if you're not in that group right now, that's a Google group we have. You'll get emails about upgrades and new amendments. And so this is our all-inclusive layer, right? Anyone in the world, people we don't know, anyone in the world can join this group, and they can get they can get that information. There's also a validator guide on xrpl.org if you want to just read about, about running a validator. And then we're going to start forming working groups within this infrastructure pod, which will be gated working groups where we actually invite people like yourselves into those groups with very specific goals. There's going to be a group about bringing down the cost of running a validator, right? There's these different things. So we're going to have very specific groups. There's going to be a group around process. So I think this is, again, there's process, what I call the micro process at your organization, but there's also a greater process on the XRPL, is how do we organize around an upgrade? How do we organize around amendments? And really there is no formal process for that right now. If you look at something like the Ethereum network, these are growing pains that they've gone through already that I think we're going through now. And if you haven't noticed, there's been a lot more features being proposed for the XRPL lately. In the past year, it's really a renaissance of features on the XRPL. And that is driving this, right? There's more things to vote for. There's more action needed by people. There's more things to review. So we're asking more of you. Perfect. Yes.
Can you explain how to make any decision about the vote?
How to make educated. So I think there's all different levels. It just depends on how sophisticated of a node operator you are. At the lowest level, I have a guy who runs a validator. He's a great guy. He started his validator at the beginning of the network because he thought blockchain was cool. He's a car guy. He builds cars. He does nothing and he follows somebody else. So he trusts the guy from XRPL Labs is who helped him set up his validator when he first did it. And really he follows him. So he looks at him and he says, hey, he's voting for it. I think that's the lowest level. You have a couple of people you follow, right? And maybe you don't follow, you at least read the amendment, right? And then you have trusted parties that you follow. I think there's usually, for bigger features, we have features that are what we call the bigs, like the AMM and NFTs, and we have what we call the smalls, like digital identity, things that are less sophisticated. For the bigs, we usually set up dev nets and test nets. So I think actually using the things, especially at a university, having a project, it's usually a pretty big ramp up, but maybe a year where there's a dev net available, like actually using it, seeing what's there, running so all the amendments are available in a release candidate. So you can have a validator that's running the release candidate. So there's a lot of people in the community that do this. I'm thinking of doing this too. You run a validator, it's not in the UNL, but it has the release candidate of what's going to be put out, and you can see if there's any problems in the code. Things like fixes, there's amendments for fixes. And I think this is the area where I can really tell there's people who are inactive because there's really no great reason. I mean, this is like, there's a fix for the AMM. I mean, you get up, every ledger close, everyone's getting error messages. It's like this, little thing with very small amounts of money. There's just no reason not to vote for this thing. So these fixes, it is a little upsetting. There's 3 fixes right now that just need a couple of votes to get into the ledger, and because of the way they're changing the code, they need to be voted in by the UNL validators. So something like that again is just running the release candidate for the fix and seeing if it works.